This is man. And this is the world around him. A little blue planet in the universe. In the space concealing many mysteries, the greatest of which is the mystery of the macrocosm. Our Earth is different from other planets. It is alive. And now we know why. Because there is water here. If the quantity of water is reduced, or at least one of its amazing features is changed, then life on Earth will vanish. The mystery of living water. When scientists supposed that water had memory, humankind was faced with incredible challenges. Man came nearer to finding the key to the main mystery of water. What is water? We all know what it is. No living matter can exist without this substance. All of life, every living thing is based on water. Water, its properties are very close to those of a living substance. Speaking of these properties, we are reminded of a living being. Until recently, it has been assumed that water's properties depend on its chemical composition. From this point of view, people have divided water into living and dead. The living water has an alkaline medium. Dead water has an acid medium. It seemed that water had no more secrets to hide.
We must look at water because it looks that it is a very easily changed substance. But the danger is, or the difficulty is, that there are so many influences.
In the 1960s, in a closed laboratory in Germany, something inexplicable occurred. A laboratory assistant dropped a vacuum-sealed ampule containing virulent poison into a vessel with distilled water. Trying to conceal her blunder, she just left it in the water. The ampule was discovered only 3 days afterwards. Since it was sealed, it did not pose any special hazard and the matter was closed. Later, this water was given to laboratory mice. And they died. Immediately, the water was thoroughly tested. Chemically, it proved to be impeccably clean. It meant that the water, without direct contact with poison, somehow adopted its properties. In other words, it received negative information from the poison. To absorb, to bleed, and to draw information, and to babble. Thirst for information. Information leak. Information deluge. Why do people always allot the features and properties of water to information? Information may also infiltrate, and one can easily be drowned in its stream. We can easily say that information be draw or raw. However, the language cannot be wrong, because it is the language that safeguards the most ancient and deepest meanings, which are formed at the dawn of human history. This leads us to the idea that information either consists of water or lives in it.
But not at the molecular level. Structural information, that's the key word. Structural information, patterns, makes a pattern in the water. Let me give you another example. Graphite and diamond are both the same composition, only carbon, pure carbon. But in this lab, we can make graphite into diamond with no additions in a few seconds. So the softest material in the world is made into the hardest material of the world with no change of composition. So this simply emphasizes that it is structure that is more important than composition.
The water molecule is a dipole. In other words, one of its ends is charged more negatively and the other more positively. This is a well-known phenomenon. One water molecule, acting through its negatively charged end, can draw another molecule by its positively charged end. And then another molecule, then another. This is how the structure of water is formed. It is fluid and short-lived. Somehow, among the changing forms, one can see stable formations. These are clusters. It is within these structures that water retains the information it has captured.
When we talk about an imprint, we talk about a measurable change of the structure by a particular experimental tool in the physical world. So the imprinting is made visible in an experimental tool, in a completely objective manner.
Water is a unique thing. It has memory. Generally speaking, it memorizes everything that surrounds it. The technogenic environment, forest, field, shop orders, cellars, everything that cleans it, everything that restores it. All that we see, hear, and feel are combinations of light, sound, electromagnetic, and many other waves. Every life form, be it a germ, an insect, an animal, or a human being, perceives them differently. It perceives them in its own strictly defined range. Only water is able to absorb the entire range of frequencies that exist in nature, and to become either living or dead under their influence. There are structures related to dead water too. Such structures do exist. This is dead water, and if you use it for watering, nothing will come out of it. We can say that water is one of the most sensitive indicators of the presence of any fields and any influences in the surrounding world. These impacts influence water and change it structurally. Meanwhile, for a human being, water remains the same, without taste, without color, and without odor. At the same time, it's impossible to find identical water on Earth. Water is like a clean sheet of paper, which can be changed by a tiny brushstroke. The great artist Leonardo da Vinci in his notes on water wrote, "Water assumes a special character as many times as there are different places where it flows." On Okinawa Island in Japan, people live incredibly long lives. They work a lot, and they suffer very few cases of such common human diseases as ischemia, atherosclerosis, diabetes, and oncological pathology. It transpires that they drink natural water, since their atoll rests on coral islands. These natural bodies are not only stunningly beautiful, but also extremely long-lived. The most ancient of them accounts for 600 million years. It is from corals that water gets knowledge that it's possible to live long while staying strong and young. This knowledge is then passed over to the water medium of the human body, tuning it for long life. In a locality called Humsakut, in the mountainous regions of Pakistan, people live infinitely long lives. Our average life expectancy is approximately 57 years, but there are peoples whose life expectancy is 100 years, that is practically twice as much. And when scientists began their investigations into the reasons why these people have such reserves, where there is no food, a deficiency of oxygen, a high mountain environment, simply where there are really no conditions to sustain life, yet the people continue to live their long lives. It transpired that the water the people consume there has quite different properties. We speak of water flowing from melting glaciers down steep mountain slopes. During the journey down, the crystal streams are filled with the energy of the sun and stones. They absorb information about the properties of the soil, about the composition of minerals and rocks. The impressions of such water are full of fresh air and a land that is untouched by civilization.
There is a Japanese scientist called Emoto, and he shows pictures that he imprints on the water. But we don't know that yet. We cannot prove that.
All these pictures were taken at Dr. Emoto's laboratory. Crystals of various forms, such are the impressions of water. This is how water reacted to a computer. A television set. And this water was shown a picture of a dolphin.
So, by the resonance and
using the resonance theory and the advent of an echo, the image is directed from the quantum level to the material world. And that is how it happens.
Max
Planck once said that everything is a wave. In other words, when we write a word on a sheet of paper and apply it to water, we can see that the water crystal changes its form. It means a transformation of the water itself under the influence of the frequencies that we emit with this word. The following words were written on several flasks of water. You are good. You are a fool. You are beautiful. At Leonid Izvekov's laboratory, water was treated to moonlight sonata. To Vivaldi. To hard rock. During his life, man consumes 75 tons of water. An enormous amount of various information is passed through our body, including chemical and structural information. 4/5 of the human body consists of water. If the body loses 2% of its liquid content, we become thirsty. If it loses 10%, we start hallucinating. If the body loses over 12% of water, we die. Avicenna, an Eastern scientist and physician who lived 1,000 years ago, after observing a ripe and juicy melon for several days, which, when wizened and dried, made a simple conclusion: old age is always dryness. Modern scientists say the same in other words: old age is loss of water by body cells. We are actually nothing more than animated water. It has to be noted that a baby in the mother's womb consists of practically 92–93% water. And when we die, our body consists of just 50% water. That is, our entire life is the exchange of water for water. In summer 1794, Avrami Kritsin, the senior huntsman in a team at the Oslatinskaya landing on the Chusovaya River in the Urals, fell severely ill. Blood was bleeding from his throat, accompanied by severe stomach pains. Death seemed imminent. But his teammates carried Avrami to a taiga spring, which was worshipped by the Vogel shamans as sacred and healing. The hunter spent almost 2 months by the spring, drank water and bathed. By the end of his stay there, he felt at the peak of health. Simultaneously, the spring dried up and only recovered the following spring after the snow had melted. Henrik Knopp, a German doctor who worked at the Demeter plants on the Chusovaya River, described this event in his diaries, but he could not explain the mechanism of his recovery.
It's rather like putting information into a computer, like the patient basically, and if that information is correct, then that will actually help that patient from a medical point of view.
It is known that the cells of a diseased organ are surrounded by unstructured water. Scientists suppose that recovery would be possible with the help of water with a special and stable structure. The next step was to prepare such water. For this purpose, they created artificial conditions at their laboratories in which water received positive information. These were lightning storms. These conditions included electrical discharges, water movement, water swirling, and water boiling. They also included water transition from one state to another. When all these conditions are observed, we shall obtain active water. The water which can be found in natural springs far from civilization. We say living water. That is the water which would be gladly accepted by the living cell.
So what is the mechanism of action of structured water on any particular situation? Does it specifically target the immune system? Does it specifically target the brain or whatever? The answer is it will go to where it's needed.
However, American researchers have now managed to create water with a directed action, although the healing process with this water will have a positive effect for the whole body. Another way to program water is to influence it with weak fields, similar in their force to the electromagnetic field of the human heart. Such water is offered to patients instead of conventional medicines.
Do I have any doubts that informational medicine works? No, I don't, because I've done so much of it, and I know it works. And I know it works in situations where pharmaceutical medicine has not worked. Now, when you see those situations in clinical practice, that's very impressive.
So that one of the most important aspects, the breakthroughs we hope for, is by understanding, by good science, understanding what is important in the structure, we will be able to imprint that water with that structure and make benign medicines, benign healing agents.
The amniotic fluid of a pregnant woman is cluster water. Under the microscope, it looks like densely clustered and clearly formed groups of molecules. You get the impression that the water is trying to protect the nascent life inside, directing all the forces of the future mother's body to its protection and development. It was also discovered that the cells of a newborn also contain such water. When rapidly frozen and seen under 20,000-fold magnification, it proves to be a snowflake of incredible beauty. With age, this snowflake, as a rule, changes its form. We performed a very interesting experiment related to the influence of photographs of one and the same person at different ages, from 7 to 44 years old. It was of interest that the crystals obtained in all these waters had both similar fragments and various differences. This is 7 years old so far. The crystal itself is shiny. It is kind. There is nothing contrived in it. In other words, this is a child, and this is why the crystal is so childish, a pure crystal. 25 years. 44. This is what the accumulated life experience looks like. We suppose that man comes to this earth with a certain objective. Looking at the images of these crystals influenced by the photographs, we can see how this program is being changed. In other words, what has been done right, according to this program, or wrong. What we have is a water medium of our body that is not only a reflection of its physical health, but also of its emotional health. You cannot hide your bad thoughts from water or deceive it by flattery. Our water feels tenderness and kindness most profoundly. Having found the tiniest anger or rudiments of evil, water in the human body will immediately start to change. Similar to this, along with the development of civilization, the natural structure of rivers and lakes is transforming at a rapid pace. Is the modern science able to influence this process? We know of an experiment performed by Turkish scientists when they added so-called ionized water into a dying lake, and it transformed in a matter of several hours. The lake turned clear and transparent, but all the beneficial microorganisms had disappeared with the diseased bacterial population. It may be supposed that as a result, a structure was formed in the water that displayed aggression to every living thing. Russian scientists used super-weak electromagnetic waves of a particular frequency, and this produced quite another result. We worked with sick lakes, so to say, in other words, with those lakes which had a pronounced degradation tendency. However, after our intervention into this process, it took a pretty long time to be truthful. Usually we spend about 3 years on such a procedure. The lake regained its health, meaning it recovered its homeostatic ability. So the problem of degradation suffered by the lake was eliminated. This can be done. The water in this lake began to burn once again. Burning is a special property of living water that distinguishes it from dead water. It's the ability to eliminate, to burn off harmful organic matter autonomously. The scientists have studied several samples of tap water. They did not find this natural burning phenomenon in any of them. Tap water will start to burn by itself only after all the polluting substances in it have burned off. This is why the water is allowed to settle. Trapped in pipes, water is deprived of oxygen, sunlight, and earth. Instead, it runs in dark and confined spaces. Instead of a smooth watercourse, it has to pass sharp turns at right angles. Overcoming these obstacles, water is filled with new information on the violence to which it is subjected and which people subject one another. Violence and envy, irritation, rage and scandal. The water supply is filled with these vibrations, and water carries them further over an endless chain of pipes from one home to another. We weaken water to such an extent that it becomes more a hindrance than a help to human beings, animals, and plants. It can moisten, but it has no power and no energy. Freed from unnatural conditions, water partially regains its lost power with every new gulp of oxygen. You have to allow water to settle for 24 hours, stirring it from time to let the chlorine out. Even when we take a shower, we receive 10 times the permissible concentration of chlorine. In essence, chlorine in the water supply is a substitute for oxygen. When chlorine burns off malignant bacteria, it actually removes the fire of life from water. For instance, if we drink non-burning water in this way, nothing will happen straight away because our body has a sufficient amount of its own fire, but it is basically dying out. As we have stated, our physiology is coupled with our vegetative system. The vegetative system is coupled with the nervous system. All this has an impact on our thoughts and emotions. Human emotions are water, said Leonardo da Vinci. And it is the form taken by these flows within the body that determine the human character. It is recorded in the history books that King Francis I was enthused by the famous description of the deluge made by Leonardo da Vinci. Darkness, wind, tempest at sea, floods of water, forest fires, water overthrowing trees and cities, ships broken to pieces, beaten on rocks in the boundless ocean of water's wrath. Talking with Leonardo, Francis I mused, "I wish so much I could taste just a drop of such water." "I will pour you some," answered Leonardo. We do not know what the King of France drank from the cup offered by the artist that evening, but we know the result. Francis went down in the history of his country as the victorious king. However, Leonardo da Vinci took the formula of water's wrath to his grave. We also noted that water is extremely sensitive to the presence of human beings, especially to the presence of human beings. Human influence proves to be a powerful agitating element, and it would be impossible to perform experiments to study the influence of wheat fields on water without taking into consideration the presence of human beings. And the first thing we have to do to get pure results is to isolate human beings from direct contact with water.
And we have done experiments with, and these aren't high scientific experiments, it's just observational experiments, and that we had students put qi into the water with intent, and they would water the plants with qi emissioned water and others with the regular water, and the plants would be double the size and more blooms, and it's much healthier looking than the ones that just ordinary water.
Water detects the tiniest changes in human mood. Any human state consists of flows of vibrations, of which the brightest are generated by love. The power of love lies in the word itself. Modern science believes that the more ancient the word, the more power it possesses. The influence of a prayer is a separate line of influences on the nature around us, and particularly on water. This is because prayer is not just a meditation and not just a certain ritual or action. This is a connection to some higher energies. So even a man who has never heard a prayer is able to guess its vibrations, while water is able to come alive under its influence. In Russia, people often speak of the unusual, invigorating power of the so-called three-bell water healing of all diseases. It is taken from 3 churches that are located so that the ringo of one cannot be heard in the others. This takes place in complete silence. This water is then poured together into a single vessel, also in complete silence. The person carrying the vessel with the 3-bell water to a seriously ill patient must not speak to anyone he meets, as otherwise the healing power of the water may be lost. I think that the dialogue with water, the dialogue between water and man, is of great significance. Any dialogue with water is the equivalent of a dialogue of a person talking in front of a mirror. Through dialogue with water, people correct and affirm themselves. This water was ordered, do this. And this water was offered, let us do this. And this is how the word thank you looks like when pronounced in different languages.
And if you're talking about we're 85% water, then we're affecting a very big water source here, the human being.
And we can really show that there are changes happening in the water due to these subtle vectors. If there's a change, then we know there's a signature.
At one time, people said, do not take tea with a person who dislikes you, meaning that it's better to drink tea together with people who like each other. This was done precisely for this reason. We are actually speaking about programming water. At the very beginning of the 19th century in Nizhny Novgorod, there lived Nikita Guryev, a fish merchant. His wife Nastasia was a woman of rare beauty and goodness. However, these 2 fine people lived an unhappy family life. In the course of 8 years, Nastasia was unable to produce a child for her husband. One day, their old nurse, Aglaya, told her about a wondrous spring in Diveeva whose water helped to cure infertility. At Epiphany, a son was born to the Guryev family. The program generating new life had somehow entered the body of the young woman.
Molecules in certain parts of the cell will affect the water. The water will affect the water next to it, which will affect molecules elsewhere. So the water is actually being used to send messages around the cell.
After visiting the Diveeva spring, the last Russian Empress, Alexandra Fyodorovna, gave birth to a long-awaited heir, Tsarevich Alexei. It is said, and not without reason, that there are prayer-soaked places. We have performed special experiments where we placed water in these places near to where people were praying. In most cases, we clearly saw changes occurring in the informational structure of the water. In other words, the energy of the water located in the praying field clearly changed. During prayer, the blood picture, the hemogram, changes. We speak here of an isolated drop of blood that is taken and observed for 1 minute while it is still alive, and we can see how it is changing in very many aspects. Experiments demonstrate that prayer may be pronounced in any language. One can pray even without words. However, the prayer should be profound and sincere. The crystal obtained from the Sergievo-Radonesky spring had a hexagonal beam structure. When analyzed, one of the beams in this crystal emitted cross-shaped light. It was so amazing. It was such a wonderful picture. I cannot find any comparison for it. This was a truly unique and very beautiful crystal. The Dead Sea, the lowest benchmark on the globe, the saltiest sea on Earth. This is a phenomenon which many scientists ascribe to tectonic processes. However, according to an ancient legend, there were once 2 towns in this place, and the residents just languished in luxury and fainéants. Allegedly in 2000 BC, due to a terrible natural disaster, these towns were wiped from the face of the earth. All that remained is the sea without life in it. The most powerful human force is fortitude, the strength of mind, which can be used either positively or negatively. Using it negatively, people pollute their fluid and common water in ponds, rivers, lakes, seas, and in the air. If we think positively, we purify the water. You can influence water from a distance of 1 meter, 1 kilometer, and from the other end of the earth. We performed experiments to such an effect. We performed experiments trying to influence water from Japan, Germany, and the United States. These were sufficiently accurate laboratory experiments, and they proved that such an influence truly exists. This influence can be measured objectively, and it does not depend on distance. The Russian philosopher and scientist Alexander Chizhevsky, as early as the 1930s, described one astounding phenomenon. Observing a colony of bacteria, he noted that from time to time these quiet microorganisms were engaged in unusual activity. Chizhevsky established that single-celled organisms became agitated in line with the advent of solar flares. While the sunlight still has a full 8 minutes to reach the Earth, yet the bacteria already know about the coming change. Detecting changes in the universe, water immediately changes its properties, both on the Earth and in the organisms of living creatures. This happens instantly. Professor Inyushin has developed his concept of forecasting earthquakes based on bioprecursors, a biomass of plant cells and bacteria with a 95–98% water content is placed in a special isolated container. A glass column with water is mounted in the same container. It receives information only from space and from the Earth's core. If there is even the slightest change, the biomass will immediately react to it and will change its electric potential. We switch it on and watch. We see that the constants are preserved, and thank heavens. This means that our city is safe. However, if there are microcurrent fluctuations, the situation is fraught with danger. A disaster may strike in several days. This experiment has now been ongoing for 3 years. During this time, we have managed to forecast floods and earthquakes in Japan, Southeast Asia, and India to a high degree of accuracy. The water in the isolated container has accumulated an enormous energy potential. We have seen that the 3-year-old water is so saturated with energy that even anaerobic bacteria cannot develop there. In fact, nothing and no one can develop there. If we use this water, we can decrease the number of future drug addicts and alcoholics by tens of percentage points. If we use this water in kindergartens and schools, we can build a nation that is resistant to drugs, to alcohol, and other harmful factors. Life should be stable and constant. Water registers these signals from the universe every instant. It receives information in the form of innumerable wave fields that are concentrated in the universe. These are also called energy and information space. However, the source of energy is God, the creator of the world. This is an energy substance of immense power, and without it, the universe would simply not exist. There is the second law of thermodynamics, well known to scientists. It holds that a system not having support from the outside, first of all by energy, is destroyed. It is unable to exist. We easily apply laws to physical processes, but when we have to deal with spiritual matters, we become simply without feeling. Many times scientists have tried to grow a living cell in laboratory conditions. In other words, they have tried to artificially reproduce life. They have mixed previously known components of living matter, and they have simulated special conditions, but it has always ended in failure. Everything is in its place. We know where and which molecules to take and how to join them, which end to which, when and at what time, and so on. All this information is contained in a giant computer. However, when we start doing this, nothing living comes out of it. There is no life. Life is a directed information process, which is connected to special properties, and primarily to the properties of water. Everything was initially created, or, put differently, everything has the significant presence of water as a part of creation. However, at the same time, and probably due to a great extent, in a professional sense, water is mentioned in the Quran as the substance through the study of which people should understand for themselves and prove the existence of God. In the 13th century, an Italian mathematician known to the world as Fibonacci, while observing various natural phenomena, discovered the golden ratio, an infinite sequence of numbers, every one of which was the sum of the two preceding numbers. Dividing any of the smaller numbers of the sequence by the neighboring greater number, we shall always get 0.618. Creating his paintings, Leonardo da Vinci used a special principle of structural perfection. He called it the golden section, where the ratio of the greater part of the section to its smaller part and the ratio of the whole section to its greater part was equal to 0.618. Long before that, in the 6th century BC, Pythagoras, the philosopher and mathematician of ancient Greece, discovered this ratio in geometry. 300 years before that, we can find that ancient Egyptians made reference to the same thing. They called it the divine essence. Does this mean that Pythagoras, Fibonacci, and Leonardo da Vinci, as well as many other men of genius, had knowledge of special laws of harmony, which form the basis of all things perfect in this world? As we know, laws do not appear of their own accord, which means there is a legislator. However, this extends beyond the realms of my professional interests, so to say. It just helps me get on in life. Quite recently, science has put forward a sensational hypothesis, stating that the laws of the universe are written in water. The golden ratio, or the divine essence, was found in a molecule of meltwater. In regular water, the angle between hydrogen atoms varies from 104 to 107 degrees. In meltwater, the angle invariably is 108 degrees, and the correlation of the length of hydrogen ties 0.618. This is a special state of water. Freezing and then melting, water deletes all information from its memory, retaining only one fundamental program, the program of life. Everything perfect has been created in accordance with this program. The arrangements of leaves on a branch, the petals in a flower, or the thread of a spider's web. the intricate form of a snail's shell, the DNA molecule, the universe. It transpires that he who created this infinite world transmitted the program of development to every living creature through water. All the information about life is contained in water. If we destroy this information, we shall destroy ourselves. Our planet has been covered with glaciers on more than one occasion. As little as 20,000 years ago, almost half of the dry land was covered with ice. The Earth was a snow-capped, lifeless desert. Perhaps the deluge of the Bible and the Ice Age were nothing more than the reaction of water to humanity moving into adulthood. It is as if water is discarding all it has accumulated. And accordingly, the opportunity arises to get a real grasp of the concept, a very profound grasp. In other words, the opportunity to gain a fresh impression, a new impression. When thousands of years ago ice turned again into water under the sun's rays, human beings were given the chance to start all over again from the very beginning. The most important thing for man is to find where he comes from, why he is here, and where he will go after death. I think that the key to this question lies in a deeper understanding of the essence of water. Meltwater is similar to a baby. It knows nothing about the reality around it. Only humans can fill it with new knowledge. Of all the creatures, it was humans who were given such an opportunity. You know, honestly speaking, I'm deeply convinced that there is something beyond this which binds us, humans, to something specific. First of all, we should be grateful that we have been chosen from all the opportunities available. If we take the human life in general and take a good look at it, we are free. We determine many things independently. How to behave, how to act, how to think, what ideas to accept, what ideas to reject, how to build out our relationships with God, to believe in God or not. And in this sense, we must remember that this energetic rain that comes down on us, this flow of energy that comes from God, we can either accept it or to put up some kind of barriers. Love,